Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another amazing episode of Death in Cambodia, Life in America. I am so excited, and I say this every time that I launch an episode, but I truly am so honored to have this legendary guest with us today. You guys know her. She is one of the pinnacles in our Khmer community. She's the author, activist, and co-screenplay writer of First They Killed My Father, streaming on Netflix and directed by Angelina Jolie. She is also the author of Lucky Child, as well as Lulu in the Sky, which further explore the parallels between Loung's life in America versus her sisters in Cambodia, as well as the journey to find healing after enduring such childhood trauma. She is a human rights activist, national spokesperson, has been on countless media outlets, deservingly, such as New York Times, CNN, and many more. Loung Ung, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, for that kind introduction. I have to say, I'm a big fan of yours. And I was just in Cambodia a few weeks ago and was walking around in Phnom Penh and all the Khmer out there, Jamriap Sua. And it was just a really cool experience listening to your voice and the interviews. And it was as if I was listening to the voices of old friends that I've known for decades, all these other wonderful, wonderful people you've had on your podcast. And it made my experience in Cambodia that much more fuller.
My gosh. Well, thank you so much for saying that. I'm in awe of the work that you've done, as I do believe the rest of the listeners are as well. So, before I dive in, Long, I wanted to lay a foundation for our listeners. I think many of us know exactly who you are as being the author of First They Killed My Father and the movie. But to lay a foundation, you were born in Phnom Penh, and the book starts out in April of 1975. Born into a high ranking family, like a lot of Khmers at the time who were targeted, and had to find a way to survive. You were 10 when the Khmer Rouge took over, and you lost both of your parents. Your books are the backbone to many school curriculums, and the movie is, I believe, one of the key movies that really teaches a lot of people about the Khmer Rouge who don't know about it. I myself, when I think about the literature that we have out there and about the Khmer Rouge, I really do think about your book first. So when we look at the books that you have written, at what point in your life did you know you needed to write these books?
So I was actually 5 when the Khmer Rouge took power in Cambodia, and I was 10
Okay.
when I left. You know, for years coming to America as a 10-year-old girl, then living in Vermont, a predominantly white state in America, as beautiful as it was, and so many wonderful things about the falls and the mountains and the friends we made. It was also a place where I didn't have many people to speak to about my story, and people just didn't know. And I think the one time I tried to speak about Cambodia, some little girl told me she didn't believe me.
Oh,
And
wow.
so for me, it really resulted in holding my story as if it was a curse. And it wasn't like a small little curse that you could just throw salt over your shoulders and have it be over with, but it was an epic horror novel, Stephen King storytelling epic kind of curse where it was the kind of thing that defined me in America. And because it was a curse and because it was a burden, I didn't want to have that history part of my story to define me. I didn't speak about it. And what I did was I wrote in my journals. I wrote in my diaries because the story had to come out some way, one way or another. So a writer to me, a writer writes. That's how I communicate. That's how I make sense of my experience or revisit my experience. I decided to take the journal pages and turn them into a book, a dream of a book anyway, was that I woke up to the news on April 15, 98 to the news that Pol Pot, the Khmer Rouge leader, had died. And in one of his many interviews, he actually said that what he did in Cambodia, he did for love. And I'm paraphrasing it, but what I remember was how angry I was, how filled with rage and sadness and bitterness and just anger that what he said, what he did in Cambodia, he did for love. And I just thought to myself, love does not a genocide make. Love does not torture. Love does not harm. Love does not kill. Love does not take children away from parents. And so it was on that day that I dreamt of the idea to publish my words into a book, to show people my version of love, the love story that my parents taught me of nurturing and support and protection. And the love stories that is real and true to this day that exist in Khmer and in all these other countries that we live in.
And did you I mean, writing in a journal is completely different from actually writing, feeling confident enough to write and publish a book. Did you feel like you had always been a writer or you always had it in you? Or was it something that you took your journals and kind of retransformed it and into what it is today?
My degree was in political science, so I really didn't know I could write a book, and I still don't know if I can write a book.
You
To be
can. Well, you can, Lung. I can tell you from the outside.
I worked really hard on it, and I think I am such an avid reader. I love books. I learn so much from books, and whether it's Viktor Frankl's or Maya Angelou's book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, and all these books that have been so instrumental in my life have been my teachers beyond borders, beyond boundaries, beyond genders, beyond histories. Like I have learned so much from books. And so even though I didn't know I could write a book, I understood pacing and content and rhythm and the musicality of storytelling. And also, I grew up speaking Khmer and Chinese and English. So I really love words. I love being able to play with words. And when I couldn't really decide or describe something in one language, I try to think of it in another language and I play with it that way. I didn't know how to write, but I knew storytelling. I understood storytelling because I grew up with memories, my father telling us stories, and in Cambodia, we're such an oral storytelling culture. So I grew up listening to so many stories because I've always loved stories. So when I sat down to write, I just knew even if my writing wasn't good, I would know how to tell a story.
In one of your in one of your previous interviews, you mentioned that you had the book To Kill a Mockingbird on your desk as inspiration, and correct me if I'm wrong, but while you were writing First They Killed My Father, that style of writing really was what you were looking for, that was your inspiration. Can you talk a little bit just about how that book was inspiration behind the voice that you wanted behind yours?
Right. So I love To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was the main protagonist character was Scout in the book, and she was like 5, 6, 7 years old, but she was sharp. She was
Mhm.
sharp. She had words that she could use to describe her emotions and her feelings. Because I didn't speak English. And so when people first met me, they didn't know I had a voice because I was so silent. I was silent because I didn't have the words. And once I found the words, I was silent because I didn't have conversational English. I had the written words, but I didn't have the spoken words. And when I wrote my book, I wanted to say the words I did not possess as a child going through the war to tell my story and to say it in a way that was wise sometimes, not sometimes, angry other times, and loving sometimes. All the experiences of emotions that children experience, but just didn't have the words to tell adults about it. But if you
Mhm.
listen to how children speak to other children, they're often very, very clear. They're very succinct, very real because they weren't thinking about being judged. They weren't worrying about whether or not they were going to be understood or misunderstood. They just spoke. And that was what I wanted to do with my words in writing because I couldn't do it in real life. I couldn't yet do it in real life, but I felt the words and I felt their trueness inside of me, even though my mouth and my tongue and my lack of English ability would not allow the words to come out yet.
Yeah, I think that just makes this project and this book all the more fascinating and inspiring to think about because it really English was not your first language. And when you read this book, you would not think that. You would not think that. And I think that definitely makes sense trying to find the parallels and speak as if you were 5 years old and write as if you were 5 years old in the style that is very similar to what you're saying, succinct, descriptive, but not as if you were saying things to try to impress other people or sugarcoat it. And I think that's what makes this book stand out is it's really really good at bringing you back to as if you were a child living in the Khmer Rouge. And you do such a great job at really painting that picture.
Thank you. I think, well, for me, if you have nieces and nephews who are 5 or 6 or 7 and you listen to the way they talk,
Yeah.
it's actually quite fascinating. You know,
So honest. They're
I
so
know,
honest
so
and real.
honest, real, and emotional and descriptive. I love being a fly on the wall to my nieces and nephews at that age.
Yeah.
And I really took so much inspiration from them because I actually wrote my book, 3 chapters in 3 different voices. I wrote it in the voice of an adult, which was the age I was. I was 28 when I decided I wanted to try to write a book. And the voice of the adult wanted people to know, wanted people to just know the story and know the history. And also there was a lot of blame and shame to it. Like, why didn't you know? Why didn't you help? Why weren't you there? It was your fault. And so the adult was really angry. And then I wrote it in the voice of an activist, of like an older person who was maybe wise, but that activist, also the person I was at that time, wanted so much for people to be educated. This is what you should know. You should know this. You should feel this. This is why we need to get involved and why we need to help. And just really wanted to preach and educate. And that was another side of me, but it didn't feel really authentic. And yet the voice that wanted to come out was the child's voice all this time. And she didn't care about preaching. She didn't care about being angry. She just wanted you to just know how she felt. Just feel my heart, feel my pain, feel my hurt and my love. She just wanted to tell her story. It was as pure as that. And her voice was the kind of the voice that I try to silence. I kept saying, like, go away. I'm an activist. I'm an adult. I am like
Mhm.
8-year-old woman. I've worked through my trauma. I've seen therapies. I've gone through a lot of happy hours with my girlfriend. Just go away. And her voice just refused to go away. And so if you're writing out there, if you have a voice that's refusing to let you go, then you should probably listen to that voice.
Yeah, I mean, it makes total sense to me because I feel like the little girl's voice is also the hardest, right? It's also the hardest and it's also the one that's going to bring you and transport you back to those moments. It brings you closest to the trauma out of all the three voices. Because I know combing through your memory is one of the hardest things to do, from interviewing my father and watching him through the interviews and watching him physically sit here but transport back to being a 15-year-old teenage boy in the Khmer Rouge was almost as if the past 40 years had not even been. It's like as if it was just he was actually there. And so what was your process combing through your memories, and in what ways did you protect yourself as you were doing so?
Because I wrote in my journal. So I had these hundreds of pages of journals. And then before I even sat down to write the first word of the book, I already made 7 trips to Cambodia. When I knew I was going to try to write, I started going back to Cambodia. And the thing about body memories is so incredible. There were times when I walked in Cambodia and did not remember whether I should turn right or left, but my body knew where to turn.
Wow.
And so those were kind of letting your body control you, because I think sometimes your brain is perhaps the last thing to understand. Your brain is perhaps the last thing to be able to decipher the information, but your heart knows, your body remembers, and your DNA somehow it's inherited a lot of legacies of your parents' strengths, your grandmother's strength, your mother's stories. So when I was writing, I had to be really aware of that I wasn't trying to produce a brain story. I
Mhm.
was trying to produce a story that was in touch with my heart, with my blood, with my DNAs, with my spirit, with even Buddhism, my father's Buddhism. That was a really many great layers of protection because it wasn't about me. When you're able to really wrap yourself in all these layers, it became less only about your story, and you become a channeler of so many of the things that you're bringing in or that's put in. I know I'm sounding a lot like woo woo right now.
It makes sense. No, it does make sense, and there must have been a way that you figured out a way to protect yourself while you're writing this, right? Because I mean, you're not only writing in the little girl's voice at the time where the trauma had hit you the most, but also um, there had to have been a process in how to do that, you know, because it is extremely difficult. As I said, I've seen it happen in front of me with my own father and interviewing him. So it does make sense. I mean, I know what you're
It's
saying.
pretty cool too. I mean, it's so great too in that for me, being able to wrap yourself around in layers of other connections made it feel so much more less alone. And that is the scary part of writing any kind of about any kind of traumas is how isolate you become through the process, and even more isolating and so alone in the experience of going in deep. And but if you are always with somebody, if you're always with a spirit or with a love, then you become less alone in the process. So, and now I envision writing as akin to going deep water diving.
Mm.
And you know, the surface of the water is your story, and then you're hopefully there's a boat on top of the water, and that is, you know, that's your anchor, and you hopefully have lots of other people on the boat with you, your father, you, your friends, happy hours, whatever it is that give you light, love, and laughter. And when you go down into your story, you are actually dropping yourself and holding onto a cable that you hold on to into the depth of the under the surface. And at every 5 meters, you want to pause. You want to look around. You want to feel your heart. You want to feel your skins. The deeper you go, the less oxygen there will be, and the more pressure will be on your skin, on your heart, and then equalize. And if you're not disoriented, if you're not in pain, if you're okay, then you go in another 5 meters. But and if that doesn't feel right, then you go right back up, and then sit in the sunshine, enjoy yourself, take care of yourself, then repeat the process. So you should never, ever, ever go and write about something that's traumatic alone, or go into that deep water diving without an anchor or a lifeline or somebody to help pull you back up. It is not always, it's actually, it can be very destructive and very dangerous.
Mhm.
And so for me, writing, having all these layers of whether I was thinking about my mother or my grandmother's spirits or my father, I was never truly alone in the writing process. I was always with somebody else. They may not be standing over my shoulders, but I felt them all the time.
Would you say it's your father's presence and your mother's presence, your grandmother's presence, they were the key kind of spirits as you were writing and working through and kind of going in the depths on the anchor?
You know, they definitely were there. I mean, definitely there were different times when my father would show up much stronger. And then there were other times when my sisters would show up. Those are live and those who are not here with us.
Mhm.
And then there are times when they would physically be there. And it is so important, like for me, writing about my father's death, and his presence was it was such a difficult scene to write.
Mhm.
I actually started reading a lot about Buddhism to try to get a sense of spirit. And that was the only way I could write that scene, was to be connected in some way or somehow through his Buddhist belief. Because, I lost my faith at a very young age. So I'm not sure, was not sure I was a believer, but he was a believer.
Mhm.
He was a devout Buddhist. And when I wrote the scene of him being taken, the only way I could write that scene was to hold on to some of his Buddhist faith. And that allowed my spirit to be there with him. And that was how I got my way. That's how I found my way to my father in that scene. And it was also how I found my way out of that scene. It was through his faith.
Yeah, I watched a previous interview about how your father was a former monk, right? And I was curious about how leaning into Buddhism, it seems like, was a helper in guiding you through the really rough scenes with your father. But I'm curious on also if Buddhism played a role in helping you heal overall from the childhood trauma that I feel like you've experienced.
Yeah.
Mm.
My father was a believer and he believed in reincarnation. And having this faith in this thought that my father believed that someday we would be reunited and that we would somehow, our spirits would find each other again. That was so healing for me because I hold on to that he believed that when he was sitting or standing or kneeling at the edge of the mass grave, those were the thoughts that he held on to.
Mhm.
And I can put myself, if I put myself in a place where all he saw was the horrors, then it probably would break me. But I can put myself in a place where his mind was probably somewhere deep in his Buddhist faith and believing that someday we'll all be reunited and there will be love and we'll eat dumplings, you know, we'll eat bao, we'll eat like, numbachok, which was his
Mhm.
favorite, like someday. And so if that was where his mind was, it's actually very healing for me to believe that. And I do believe that. I do think for somebody as powerful as he was and as devout as he was, I do not believe his mind was at the grave. I do not believe his body might have been there, but I do not believe his mind there. I believe he put his mind somewhere else where
Mhm.
he was safe and where he was loved.
Yeah, and so attending, like, Buddhist temples and being with the chants and hearing it and being in spaces like that must feel as if you are he's right there with you, right? He's so
Yeah,
close to you when you're in those areas.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I go to a temple and I hear that, I feel their spirits very strong, and that's very healing.
So we think about the book and the timeline of the book. How long did it take you to take your journals into a published book?
The writing of it probably took me a year and a half to write. Then the writing of it and then the research of it, the researching the book, because I had to read a lot of things. There was a part of me again that was the activist that wanted to know so much, have all these information, all these data, use very little of those. The
Mhm.
information. So the writing took a year and a half, and the research took longer. And by the time I was writing to when it came out, it was 2 years.
Mhm. And did you think it was gonna take off the way that it did?
Heck no. No. I mean, this is a story about a little Cambodian girl growing up in a country where nobody knew anything about or knew very little about.
Mhm.
And when we came to America, I studied Russian history, Chinese histories, American history, the Civil War, and even a little bit of Vietnamese history in terms of the U.S. connection to the Vietnam War. The history I didn't get anything of was Cambodian history, the Khmer Rouge history, Khmer stories. And so I just figured people didn't care, people didn't want to know. And then it's a title called First They Killed My Father. So it wasn't exactly, I didn't think it was a title that anybody wanted to pick up. I was really surprised that so many people picked it up and read it. And I'm grateful. I'm really, really grateful because, again, I underestimated the strength and courage of the human heart. I really didn't think people would want to read anything that would break their heart. And I am so happy to be proven wrong because if you read my book, you know that it'll break your heart, but you also will know that the heart is not only the most vital organ in the human body, but the strongest muscle in the human body. And for as many times it breaks, it will heal. And so many people knew this long before I did.
Yeah, especially with the stark title of First They Killed My Father. How did you go about naming it that title?
I wanted a title that was not going to trick people into thinking it was anything else but about the survival of war.
Mhm.
Also, war is hell. War is difficult. Again, there was that part of my adult activist part that came into the writing of the book is that war is hell and difficult and it's something that should break your heart. You
Mhm.
shouldn't think that it was something that was easy. As you know, years and decades later, it's still breaking your heart.
Right.
Your dad is still having memories about it.
Mhm.
And then for us who survived, when people cover or journalists cover the stories of war, it was usually a paragraph in the international news sections, or even if or a couple of sentences, and that wasn't the truth. That
Mhm.
wasn't the truth. I really wanted people to just know what it took to survive a war, what it took, the strategies, the work, and that it was indeed hellish, and that the title should say that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I I think that this book is named as it should be, right? Because it's not meant to be a pretty name, and it's not meant to be talking about a pretty topic. This is a very, very horrific thing that many of our community had experienced. In your second book, The Lucky Child, and I do want to just leave a little bit time to discuss the books afterwards, because I think a lot of people don't know that you do also have a sequel and then one after that. You talk about being the sibling chosen to go to America, and later just the differences, and also the privilege that you had seen in the difference, the way that your life had gone, and then your sister who had stayed in Cambodia. What is your relationship with this experience, and the privilege, that you feel like you felt, and how has that fueled you, and how has that informed you as an adult?
Yeah. I was very blessed and very privileged to come to the US, but also to be able to go back to Cambodia. I made my first trip to Cambodia in 1995, and I've been going back all many times. I think it's 45 or 50 trips now back to Cambodia. Every time I go, I learn something new and something different and something to value and appreciate. When I wrote my first book again, First I Killed My Father, because I wanted to tell people what it took to survive the wars. And I wanted to tell the love stories that survived that war. And when I left Cambodia, I was 10 and my sister was 12, and we were the bestest of friends and kindred spirits. And I ended up in America, and the US did not normalize diplomatic relationship with Cambodia until 1991, which meant that with my passport that I got at age 18, I could go anywhere in the world with the exception of Cuba and Cambodia. So I was not able to reunite with my sister until 1995. For 15 years, I really missed having a relationship with my sisters. And this is still a thing that it's still the thing that kind of hurts me the most, that I grew up with 3 sisters, and all of a sudden I was in America with my brother and my later 2 nieces, and I loved being a sister. Growing up, I loved being a sister. I love having a sister, the boss. I love having a sister to tell me what to do. I love that we were wearing the same New Year's dresses. I love that we did our hair. There were just so many things about having being a sister that was so much fun for me growing up, that I have such vivid memories of. And
Mhm.
then not to have that. And so was the guilt of also enjoying being in America.
Yeah.
As much as I miss my sister, when I fought with a girl and my brother said, "You better not fight with the American girls because America may send you back to Cambodia for being a bad kid." I
My
didn't
gosh.
want to be sent to Cambodia because it was like the war and the soldiers and the horrors. And so, as much as I loved her and missed her, I didn't want to go back. And the privilege that I had that choice,
Mhm.
I could make that choice and she couldn't. And I go back to Cambodia, and I am so grateful to be able to have that relationship with her. And Lucky Child follows my life growing up in America as a refugee, and then my sister Ju's life as an IDP displaced person. And it goes back and forth in our alternating chapters, telling of our separate lives. And through that writing, we've been able to really connect and bond. My sister Ju really loves brushing my hair. And
Yeah.
so my sister and my cousins would go to the river and they would just wash their hair, wash each other's hair, and they pick each other's lice and they brush it with their fingers. And that was a bonding experience. And so my sister's big worry was, who brushed your hair in America?
You're like, "Nobody. I couldn't find anybody to brush my hair."
All these little things that I had that she didn't have. And really, only by going back to Cambodia did I come to realize that she also has so many things that I didn't have. And they are all of value, of connections, of family, and of love. When I went through my girl body change, I learned what I needed to learn from a sex ed teacher. who
Mhm.
told me, like, from a couple of pages of books what my body was going through. My sister Jew had my grandmother, my aunt, her cousin, my neighbors, and they sat around each other and, around the bonfire in the living room, and they told stories of the changes their bodies were going through.
Mm.
They didn't have feminine products, but they showed each other how to use grama and how to use scarves. And so that's a beautiful experience that I didn't get to have.
Yeah.
That bonding experience of learning about the change of your body alone versus with a community.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you had that experience, and I'm assuming through Lucky Child it forced you guys to have the conversations just, "Hey, where did your life take you? This is where my life took me." And I'm glad that that allowed you to have those conversations because I could imagine that, you know, had it been left there, there could be potential like resentment feelings that could have risen from the fact that you were the lucky child, and that's not out of something that you could have controlled, but it was what had happened. So I can imagine just being able to really sit down and work on the book in that way allowed you guys to really to have those conversations and have a great relationship together.
She's not resentful of me and I'm not resentful of her. And we have been able to share our lives in the last, since 1995 when I started going back. Writing Lucky Child allowed me to be able to just value what she values and
Mm-hmm.
to see Cambodia and see her life through her eyes. And her life is beautiful.
Right.
I mean, it's beautiful. She grew up celebrating rainwater. Like when it rained, kids are happy. They go out and all the spigots and spouts came from somehow extended from the roof and they're catching water and they're pouring them into the water jug.
Yeah.
And then I think to myself, like, when was the last time I turn on the faucet and get hot and cold water and think, woohoo, like with that kind of joy,
Yeah, it's very
And
true.
so I had to be able to see that and
Yeah.
to experience that. And now I can travel through Cambodia with much less judgments and much less with fewer pains of what we have and what we didn't have,
Right.
because what we both have turned out to be really beautiful.
Right.
Um,
So it wouldn't be right for us to not talk about the movie and the movie adaptation, which released in 2017 with Angelina Jolie. I know that Angelina mentions that she bought your book when she was doing another film in Cambodia. Correct me if I'm wrong. And she really leaned on your book to really educate her on exactly what had happened in that country. You guys had both later had met, become friends, and decided to write a screenplay together. So, I mean, quite honestly, just talk to me about the experience of the fact that Angelina Jolie, like meeting her and having her take an interest in your story. Like, I mean, if she called me up today, I'd be like, oh my gosh, like, I can't believe this is happening.
we've been friends for 25 years now.
Wow.
And she was filming the movie Tomb Raiders in Cambodia. I think it's 2000 or so, and which is when my book came out. And she picked up a copy of the book from a street vendor in Siem Reap. She's just a really good woman. She's a really good woman. We've been friends for so long. We believe in the same thing. We are both humanitarian activists. We both believe in caring for the world and contributing to the world. We both love Cambodia. We work with 20,000 Cambodian extras and filmmakers, and everybody got to put imprints of their DNAs and their hearts and their soul onto the film. So it was a really wonderful place. We filmed in 14 different locations. We brought in monks to come in and bless the land. And then, as Khmer, we have those urns with the incense sticks that would travel. And it was just a really, really wonderful experience. And I could not have found a better leader for the film whose heart I trust and whose integrity I knew was without a doubt leading in the right direction.
Right. I think that would be anybody's worry, especially when it's an autobiography. When it's being adapted into a film, you want to make sure that it's authentic as possible. I mean, what were the main non-negotiables when it came to the film adaptation? That you just that it had to this scene had to be in here, or this had to be a certain way because that was what and that was how you wanted the story to be told in a film. What were some of those non-negotiables?
We wanted an all Cambodian cast. We wanted it to be in the Khmer language. I mean, it gives me chills thinking about it. It's a big Hollywood film, and the Khmer language is really
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And I wanted to. I just think anything, any other language just wouldn't have the same soul, the same feel. And so, how we worked it with the Netflix was that we'll have the dialogue not be really, really long. It will almost be a silent film. There's not gonna be when you watch it, you're not gonna have to read pages and pages and pages of dialogue, and we'll work on the interpretation of the dialogue. And then we also wanted to shoot the whole thing in Cambodia. We wanted to bring in talents and staff, like, everything was shot in Cambodia for 4 months we were in Cambodia, and we shot every day.
I think having those non-negotiables are so, so important, and as I said, it sticks to the authenticity of the story and to the art and to what the purpose of the book is trying to do. How was it to watch your little self on screen and actually physically in front of you see these scenes from your book in real life? I can imagine that would also be triggering sometimes in some ways because it just feels like you're reliving it again, but actually on screen. So talk to me a little bit about what that experience.
What was really amazing for me was I thought the same thing. I thought it was gonna be very re-triggering, even though I by that time, I've been back to Cambodia over 40 plus trips and have spent, a lot of time in Cambodia working as an activist, visiting with my family, hanging out with my grandmother when she was still alive, being an auntie to my nieces, riding our motorcycles, going to all the good Khmer street food places. So I've had decades of really making new memories in Cambodia that are beautiful to overshadow the dark, sad memories.
Mhm.
Whereas when I left Cambodia, all I had were the dark memories. And those were the memories that I held on for 15 years until I was 25 when I went back, that felt like a curse. And the curse was lifted when I went to Cambodia and started making more beautiful memories. So but yet with that said, I was really afraid I was going to be traumatized. So I did yoga, I exercised, I saw my therapist, I went to happy hours with my friends. There's a theme here, therapy and happy hours. And I have to say, I was really preparing myself for the war scenes, for the death scenes. I thought those were the scenes that were going to trigger me. And they didn't at all. They didn't. I think because I steeled myself, I worked so hard, but the first scene we shot of the family sitting together, and every time I talk about it, it's hard for me to get through talking about without being emotional. And I'm already emotional now just thinking about it. Like when we shot the scene of the nine of us sitting together at the dinner table and just the characters playing my father, my mother, eating, rice and the it's like and like the cha on the plate and the kids kicking their feet under the table and just playing and jostling with each other was that was how it was for us. And I have not had a memory like that since I was 5. Throughout the war and throughout my life, that was a memory I held on to in my head. That's why we wrote the scene like that,
Yeah.
because that was a memory that I hold so dear to me. And when I saw that scene, it broke me. It just broke me. I was crying and I had to leave the set. And it was surprising to me because I did not expect that scene to break me. I thought all the other scenes would break me, the horrible scenes, but ultimately it was the scene of family and love and beauty and grace that broke me.
Mhm.
God, life is so interesting.
Yeah.
Creativity is so interesting. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that was re-triggering in some way, you know?
Well, I think it's giving you a scene that you wish that you had more of, more time of, and it takes you back to a time before everything went south, everything went dark. And it makes complete sense that that particular scene would be the one that really triggers the emotions, because for just a little moment there, you've got a capsule of what life could have been, right? Or was. When you look back on your life's work, Lung, the activism, all the stuff that you have done, what would you say is your main goal and your main purpose of everything that you've done so far in your accomplished life?
Well, that's a really good question. I think just to be a decent human being. I mean, I've been privileged and blessed to have found really good work, and um, really, really fortunate to get to go to college, to get a scholarship to go to college, to work for 3 years at a domestic violence shelter where I learned about the resilience and the strength and beauty of a mother's strength to keep their kids safe, to meet a really wonderful guy who I've been with for over 30 years now, and to have some of the best friends. I don't need to be great. I don't need to do all these things, but it's important to be a good person. I'm a decent human being.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your knowledge with us, Lung. Honestly, having you on the podcast is a huge milestone for me. Truly, you're an inspiration to so many of us in the community, and a pillar for the education for the Khmer Rouge, and not only just the Khmer Rouge, but our people and what we survived and the resilience that we've gone through. Being able to write these books and having the tenacity to take it to the heights that it has gotten to is really, really incredible. So I'm just in awe of what you've been able to accomplish. And not only that, your positive attitude at the end of it all, at the end of the day, as you mentioned just now, being a good human being, having survived everything that you've gone through and the trauma that you have, it's really amazing. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for all that you do.
And I want to thank you. I really mean it. I've enjoyed your podcast, and I've listened to so many, and you do such a good job. You ask very thought provoking questions and also very kind questions. And you're doing good work. You're doing good work. And I hope you keep going. I know I've written you a long email about season 3 already.
You have. Thank you for that. Thank you. I've actually taken those tips to heart. So thank you.
Looking forward to hearing and listening to season 3.
Thank you very much, Lung, for coming on.
Thank you. Have a good day.